Hello, Joe Lum here. Another Friday and another movie review. This week I'm going to be reviewing the 1987 film The Untouchables, starring Kevin Costner and Robert De Niro. When you're done watching this video, you can check out the movie review playlist. It's in the description box. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Time to get down to business. The Untouchables is a 1987 American crime film directed by Brian De Palma, produced by Art Linson, and written by David Mamet. It stars Kevin Costner as Elliot Ness, Charles Martin Smith, Andy Garcia, Robert De Niro as Al Capone, and Sean Connery. Set in Chicago in 1930, the film follows Elliot Ness, played by Kevin Costner, as he forms the Untouchables to bring Al Capone, played by Robert De Niro, to justice during Prohibition. The screenplay is loosely based on Ness and Oscar Farley's 1957 book, The Untouchables, and the real-life events it was based on, though most of its plot was fictionalized. The Grammy Award-winning score was composed by Ennio Morricone, and it features period music by Duke Ellington. The Untouchables premiered on June 2nd, 1987 in New York, and it went into general release a day later in the United States. The film grossed $106.2 million worldwide and received generally positive reviews from critics. It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards. Connery won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, as well as a Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actor in a Motion Picture. So this dates back 15-20 years before it was released in theaters. Ned Tannen spent years trying to obtain the rights to Elliot Ness's life story while working as an executive at Universal in the 70s and 80s. After becoming the head of motion picture productions at Paramount, which owned the film and television rights to Ness's memoir, The Untouchables, Tannen immediately hired Art Linson to begin producing the film adaptation. He was not interested in adapting an ABC television series based on Ness's book, and sought out to create a more serious, authentic depiction of Ness's career in Chicago. Linson hired playwright David Mamet to compose an original script for the film. Most of Mamet's screenplay was used, but director Brian De Palma slightly rewrote some scenes during production in order to incorporate new locations. For instance, the scene paying homage to the Potemkin Stairs from Battleship Potemkin in 1925 was moved from a hospital to Chicago Union Station. A month after the film was released, De Palma downplayed his own role on the script. Being a writer myself, I don't like to take credit for things I didn't do. I didn't develop this script. David used some of my ideas, and he didn't use some of them. I looked upon more clinically as a piece of material that has to be shaped with certain scenes here or there. But as for the moral dimension, that's more or less the conception of the script, and I implemented it with my skills, which are well developed. It's good to walk in somebody else's shoes for a while. You get out of your own obsessions, you are in the service of somebody else's vision, and that's great discipline for a director. The character of IRS agent Oscar Wallace was partially based on Frank J. Wilson, the IRS criminal investigator who spent years keeping tabs on Capone's financial dealings before laying charges. Unlike Wallace, Wilson was not killed during the investigation and was later involved in the Lindenberg kidnapping case. Before we get into the plot of the film, let's look at the historical accuracy. While the film is based on historic events, most of the film is fictionalized or inaccurate. The raid at the Canadian-United States border never happened, and neither did the courthouse or railway station shootouts. Ness did not kill Nitti, who died in 1943, 12 years after the Capone trial, by suicide, the day before Nitti himself was scheduled to be in court. In reality, Ness's unit had very little to do with Capone's final tax evasion conviction, which was orchestrated by the U.S. Attorney George E. Q. Johnson and IRS agent Frank J. Wilson, who inspired the character of Oscar Wallace but never part of the Untouchables. The scene where Al Capone beats a lieutenant to death with a baseball bat is based on an urban legend, albeit one that historians doubt actually happened. After discovering that John Scalise, Albert Anselmi, and Joseph Ginta were planning to betray him, Capone reportedly invited the trio to a dinner party and beat them to death. In the film, Ness's wife is called Catherine, and they have a young daughter. In real life, Ness's wife at the time was Edna, and the couple had no children, though Ness would later adopt a son called Robert. Well, let's get to the plot of the movie. 1930 Chicago, during Prohibition, Al Capone supplies illegal liquor and nearly controls all the city. A Bureau of Prohibition agent called Elliot Ness has been tasked with halting Capone's activities, but his first attempt at a raid fails due to a corrupt policeman alerting Capone. So he encounters an Irish-American officer by the name of James Malone, who opposes the rampant corruption and offers to help Ness. They find a man from the police academy who has not yet come under Capone's influence and still believes in the ideal aspects of law enforcement, in the form of George Stone, an Italian-American whose birth name is Giuseppe Petri, and an accountant by the name of Oscar Wallace from Washington, D.C. They successfully raided a Capone liquor warehouse and started to gain positive publicity, with the press dubbing them the Untouchables. Al Capone was livid, and he killed the warehouse manager with a baseball bat to warn all of his other subordinates. Then there was a discovery that Capone had not filed his income tax return for 4 years. So Wallace suggests trying to build a tax evasion case against him, as Capone's network keeps him well insulated from his other crimes. One of the thugs offered Ness a bribe to drop his investigation, but he refused. After Capone's enforcer, Frank Nitti, threatens to kill his wife and daughter, he immediately moves them out of the area into a safe house. In a different raid on the Canadian border, Ness and his team intercept an incoming liquor shipment, killing several gangsters and capturing Capone's bookkeeper named George. They eventually persuade him to testify against his employer. Back in Chicago, Nitti, who was dressed as a policeman, kills Wallace and George in an elevator at a police station and leaves a taunting message for Ness. Ness then confronts Capone at the Lexington Hotel after the murders, but Malone intervenes, urging Ness to focus on persuading the DA not to dismiss charges against Capone. Realizing that Mike Dorset sold out Wallace and George, Malone forces Dorset to reveal where Capone's accountant, Walter Payne, is hiding. That evening, one of Capone's men broke into his apartment. While he chased him down with a shotgun, Nitti ambushed him with a Thompson machine gun. Shortly afterwards, Ness and Stone arrive to find Malone wounded before he dies. He shows them which train Payne will take out of town. As the duo await Payne's arrival at Union Station, Ness sees a young mother with 2 suitcases and her child carrying in the carriage, climbing up the lobby stairs. Ness ultimately decides to assist her, but then the gangsters guarding Payne appeared as Ness and the woman reach the top of the stairs, and a bloody shootout occurs. Though outnumbered, Ness and Stone manage to capture Payne alive and kill his escorts, keeping the mother and child safe. Later in court, Payne testifies at Capone's trial. Ness observes that Capone appears strangely calm and that Nitti is wearing a gun in the courtroom. The bailiff removes Nitti and searches him to find a note from a Chicago mayor, which effectively permits him to carry the weapon. However, noticing Nitti possesses a matchbook with Malone's address written inside, Ness realizes that he killed Malone. Panicked, Nitti shoots the bailiff before fleeing the courthouse roof, where Ness captures him. But after he insulted the memory of Malone and gloats that he will escape conviction for murder, Ness pushes Nitti off the top of the roof before his death, avenging the murders of Wallace and Malone. Stone gives Ness a list taken from Nitty's coat, which shows that the jurors are all on Capone's payroll. Behind closed doors, Ness persuades the judge to switch Capone's jury, with one hearing an unrelated divorce case by telling the judge that he is on Capone's payroll and they can prove it. This prompts Capone's lawyer to enter a guilty plea, and that outraged Capone, who violently objects. Capone is later convicted of tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in prison. On the day Capone starts serving his sentence, Ness closes up shop, gives Malone's St. Jude medallion and callbox key to Stone as a farewell gift, and he leaves the police station. When a reporter asks him what he'll do upon the probable repeal of prohibition, to which he replies, "I think I'll have a drink." End the movie. After its June 3rd, 1987 release in 1,012 theaters, with a budget of $25 million to make, it grossed $10,023,094 on its opening weekend and ranked the 6th highest opening weekend of 1987. It went on to make $76.2 million in North America. According to producer Art Linson, the polls conducted the film showed that approximately 50% of the audience were women. Ordinarily, a violent film attracts predominantly men, but this is also touching about redemption in relationships, and because of the audience tends to forgive the excess when it comes to violence. The Untouchables received positive reviews from film critics. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 83%, based on reviews from 75 critics, with an average of 7.60 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, "Slick on the surface but loaded with artful touches, Brian De Palma's classical gangster thriller is a sharp look at period Chicago crime, featuring excellent performances from a top-notch cast." On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average of 79 out of 100, based on 16 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average of A- on an A+ to F scale. My overall rating for this movie is a 75 out of 100. Once again, while the film is based on historic events, most of the film is fictionalized or inaccurate. For instance, Eliot Ness did not kill Nitti, who died in 1943, 12 years after the Capone trial, by suicide, the day Nitti himself was supposed to be in court. In reality, Ness's unit had very little or nothing to do with Capone's final tax evasion conviction, which was done by attorney George E.Q. Johnson and IRS agent Frank Wilson, who was inspired by the character Oscar Wilde but never part of the Untouchables. And this is going to sound crazy, but this was the movie that made Kevin Costner a household name in Hollywood. Kevin Costner would go on to star in a bunch of other Hollywood blockbusters, which would win a lot of Academy Awards. And I hope to review some of those Kevin Costner movies in the near future.
Don't